Hi, I'll continue with paragraph 22 of the chapter on Appoggiaturas in Carl Philipp Manuel Bach's Versuch über die wahre Art, das Klavier zu spielen. Die Noten nach den Vorschlägen, ungeachtet sie von ihrem Wörter etwas einbüßen, verlieren doch nicht ihre Manier, wenn eine drüber steht. Figur 16. Hingegen muss man auch nicht die Manier über diese Noten setzen, welche der Vorschlag haben soll. Man muss also allezeit die Manier über ihren gehörigen Ort deutlich andeuten. Sollen Manieren zwischen den Vorschlag und der folgenden Note angebracht werden, so müssen sie auch dazwischen angedeutet sein. Figur 17. So here's figure 16, and you can see the sign for the turn is over the principal note, the B. And so that keeps its ornament. So you play that ornament with the B, or with the Abzug. The B is the Abzug. And here's how it sounds. And here's figure 17, and you can see the sign is between the appoggiatura and the following note, and this is how that sounds. Bach is talking about those ornaments for which there are signs, as opposed to ornaments consisting of small notes. And what can be seen in that paragraph is how oblivious Bach is to the idea that the experts have, that the appoggiatura is there so that people like you or me don't ornament it. The way he talks about ornamenting make sure the sign, if the ornament is meant for the appoggiatura, put it above the appoggiatura. If it's meant for the following note, put it above there. If it's meant to go between the appoggiatura and the following note, then place it between them. He's completely oblivious, and you could gather from that he's maybe rather talking to composers as opposed to people like looking at compositions or learning them. But then think who he's talking to. He's talking to Mozart, he's talking to Beethoven, he's talking to Haydn. And if you're listening to this, think of the company you're keeping. I mean, think of who else is listening. And if you imagine yourself in the classroom, who else has listened? If you look to your right, there's Mozart, or if you look to your left, there's Beethoven. Or if you look behind you, there's Haydn. And you're there among them, listening too, because they all listened. And they all listened to that paragraph. And who else? Because just this might be, you might wonder, think, well, this paragraph is not so relevant, it's fairly obvious. But who should be listening and who isn't listening, or who aren't listening, are publishers. And it would be important for them to listen to that and to know that. And because I could imagine where in a scenario where it's relevant, they can know, if they listen to that paragraph, pay attention to it, one, they can know that Bach was oblivious to the idea that the Appoggiatura is there so people like you and me don't ornament it. And two, they can know that Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, and you, if you're a composer, listening to this, sitting in that class with those people, you can know that these composers put the ornament there where they wanted it to be, that they made sure they did it. And if you think of a publisher, you know, a publisher's two people working in a publishing place, and they're looking at an autograph, and they go, you know, they see the sign of the turn, and it's over the Appoggiatura. And then the one says to the other, this is obviously a mistake. He obviously meant it for the following note. Because as we know, the ornament is there so people like them don't ornament it. And then they go, the colleague says, oh, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Let's put that there where it belongs. And so they'll put the sign over the following note because they know better. And then the other one will say, oh, and did you know that Appoggiatura means to lean? And the other one will say, yes, I certainly did. Very good. And there you can see again, that would be another case, you know, Lilliput or mediocrity and their superior knowledge will again, there you'll have seen genius being attacked and eradicated because all the Lilliput people know better. Mediocrity knows better. Arrogance and ignorance go hand in hand. And arrogance is what ignorance uses to ensure its survival. Yeah, so those great composers listened, and you're listening to it too. Vor ausgeschriebenen und in den Takt eingeteilten Vorschlägen von oben können manchmal sowohl lange als kurze Vorschläge aufs Neue angebracht werden. 1. Wenn die vorhergehende Note wiederholt wird, Figur 18a. 2. Wenn der ausgeschriebene Vorschlag nicht vor der Schlussnote steht, wie man bei B diesen Fehler sieht. Ausgeschriebene Vorschläge von unten leiden keinen neuen Vorschlag vor sich, weder von unten noch von oben, C, noch hero aber wohl, D. So here's figure 18a, and there's two examples to this. And here is a good spot. You know, when you're examining a book like this or trying to find the correct answer, you look for all the knowns you can possibly find, or those places where you can be 100% positive. And Bach, in this paragraph, he's talking about how an appoggiatura can get another appoggiatura, a second one. And so a place where it can get them is when the note is repeated. And you see that there in the first example, A, and so the note A then is repeated, and that A and the first beat of the bar is an appoggiatura, and so it gets another appoggiatura. And so in terms of knowing things for certain, Bach says that both a long and a short appoggiatura can be added to an appoggiatura when it repeats the preceding note. So he says long and short, and what you get then in this example here is the first example, which is the long appoggiatura. So that B is an appoggiatura of changing value, changeable value. And so according to the common rule, it would take up half the value of the following note. So it'll take up half the value of the A. And so you can know that for definite in this instance. And all these places where you can know for definite, they help in narrowing down and in coming up with the correct answer. And then in the second example of A, you know for definite then that this is a short appoggiatura. He says you can have both a long and short appoggiatura added. And so he provides the long appoggiatura and then the short appoggiatura. So you know that second one for definite is a short appoggiatura. And even though it's written out as a semiquaver or a 16th note, and one could think it will take up half the value of the following note, and when you're really trying to wonder what's the correct answer, you wouldn't know, is this a short appoggiatura or is it a long appoggiatura? And so you have an example here where you know for definite that it's a short appoggiatura because Bach said it's a short appoggiatura, which means it's so short that you hardly notice that anything of the value of the following note has been lost. So that's that's a case. All these moments there in terms of figuring it out, they are very helpful when you get those moments where you know 100% that it's correct, or 100% what Bach meant. And in the roll of honor in that second example, it will be played that B will be played as a semiquaver or 16th note. So the B and the A in that first beat of the bar, they'll be played as two 16th notes. And that's how the roll of honor, how Lilliput will play it, and it'll be wrong. So here's how A sounds, the first example of A. And here's the second example of A. And here's figure 18B. And so in the second bar of this example, you can see the written out appoggiaturas, the F and the D. And so those small notes, the extra appoggiatura added to that F and D, indicated by the small notes, the G and the E. That's a mistake, according to Bach. And that C is the final note that it goes to then at the end of that bar. And so you don't add the extra appoggiatura before the final note. I'll play in three different ways. I'll play the example without the extra appoggiatura. So I'll play, so to speak, the correct version of that. And then I'll play it with a kind of a short appoggiatura, with the E and G as a short appoggiatura. And then I'll play the E and G as a long appoggiatura, so taking up 2/3 of the value of that F and D. So you can hear the difference. And I don't want to say what the difference is, because I don't want to, influence your idea or what you might notice. But I'd say, I provide the examples just for the video, but the best thing is for you to try it yourself and see what you discover. What do you notice? Because Bach here is describing the world of music. So when you're out of the cage and moving in the world of music, Bach is describing what it is you'll find there. And when Bach says it's a mistake to add the appoggiatura, an extra appoggiatura before the appoggiatura before the end note, you can ask yourself, you can wonder why. And as well, you can wonder, why might Bach be talking about the laws of nature, as opposed to just giving you a rule? And that's all there to be researched or sought after when you try the examples, when you listen, when you explore them. And I just want to read a quote I took down of Beethoven that I found on the internet, probably. So Beethoven said, "Don't only practice your art, but force your way into its secrets, for it and knowledge can raise men to the divine." And how did Beethoven force his way into its secrets? He doesn't, in that quote, you don't learn how. He's talking in general or in abstract, but I can tell you how Beethoven forced his way into the secrets of his art, and that was through this book, and that was looking at those examples and doing what you have the opportunity to do, in trying it, in listening. And I would say, and maybe you can see that if you're in the cage, if you're only playing notes, that'll be impossible, because you are not. It's only possible if you're moving in the world of music, if you escape the cage. because you won't have, the notes. When you play notes, they're of no consequence. You can play them any way you choose to play them. It doesn't matter. It's all down. When you're in the cage, everything is down to personal preference. What do I prefer? But when you're outside of the cage, you're in the world, laws of nature. You move with the laws of nature, and then you find out when you break the laws, because when you do, you're immediately out of the world of music, and you want to stay in the world of music. You want to live there. And so, how did Beethoven force his way into its secrets? He tried those. He was listening, and he tried those examples, and so he did what I'm urging you to do. So, if you're watching these videos, and it's like I'm guiding you along this path, and what we're seeing here is Beethoven is giving his endorsement. It's like we're going along the trail, and then carved on a tree or somewhere along the way was that, and it's like Beethoven was here. So you're traveling this road, and you see Beethoven traveled this road too. And what does he tell you? He tells you what it did for him, what unlocking the secrets of this book did for him. And I've called it virtuosity with joy. Beethoven, as you can see from the quote, it raised him. He sees it that it raised, unlocking the secrets of his art, raised him to the divine. That's how he perceived it. And when he says, so don't only practice your art, but force your way into its secrets, for it and knowledge can raise men to the divine. It here is insight. Insight and knowledge can raise men to the divine. So it was insight and knowledge that raised Beethoven to the divine, in his opinion. I mean, that's how he perceived it. That's how he describes it. And how did he do it? He gained insight, forcing his way into its secrets with that book, with those examples, doing not exactly, but the same as what I'm doing. Doing what Lilliput doesn't do. Lilliput lacks all insight. So that's just I'm just pointing out Beethoven was here. He's traveled this road. We're on the right path. And you have gotten here. If you encounter that, normally that quote, it's just, it sounds idealistic, and you think, oh yeah, it'd be lovely if I could unlock its secrets. Or you might wonder, how do I force my way into the secrets of my art? Because Beethoven, he doesn't have to, first of all, he doesn't have to tell you, it was this book that made me Beethoven. But it's not alone the book. I mean, you have to escape the cage. Beethoven escaped the cage. But you have to start noticing the world outside of the cage, paying attention to it, respecting it, observing it, noticing it. All those things have to be done to understand its secrets. You know that this is the road Bach was talking about, because somebody might tell you the quote, but you've seen it here carved in a tree along the way. Beethoven was here. So I've played those so you can compare and wonder, you know, what do I notice? What do I hear? And as well, I've played them again so that I play each of those as if I'm convinced of every one. I don't try and play the mistakes deliberately worse. I try and play the mistakes like I'm convinced it's not a mistake, like I'm convinced it's the right answer. And here's C. And so I'll play how it sounds. So it's C is the Appoggiatura from below, and you can see written in there are the two types of extra Appoggiatura Bach talked about, one from above and one from below, and that neither work with an Appoggiatura from below, so the D, which is in the Appoggiatura of the E. And so I'll play how it sounds without the Appoggiatura, so just with the Appoggiatura from below, and then each of the two versions. And with this piano, the D is not good and the E lacks body. So the example is not ideal. The limitations of the piano limit me. So I just want to say that. So try it yourself in terms of, you know, forcing your way into its secrets. Ask yourself, don't believe what Bach says. Wonder, is this true? What he says. And see what you observe. And again, I don't want to say what you should hear. I'll just leave it up to you, but try it yourself, because in the piano, all these notes are bad in that piano. The C as well is not good, for different reasons. The D is, you'll hear an example there of one of the things that happens with the D. It doesn't stay in tune. The strings aren't attached correctly, which causes problems. The E might as well have to do with the strings, but yeah, it lacks body. Yeah. And then the C doesn't stop sounding, which is a nuisance too, I'll tell you. And it's distracting. So I don't want to talk about what you might observe in the examples, but I will say, when you consider what Bach says there about the way the Appoggiatura from below, that you can't add an extra Appoggiatura to that. If you think, connect it with what else Bach has said about the Appoggiatura, and he said that in paragraph 10, and he said that, so the changeable Appoggiatura from below, it doesn't easily occur other than when it follows the preceding note. So if you're examining that and wondering should I agree with Bach? Should I disagree? What do I notice? Do I hear that there's a truth to that statement? And if you do arrive at this stage where you agree with Bach and you think, yes, the Appoggiatura from below doesn't come doesn't easily occur, you know, unless they repeat the previous note. Well, you can see when you add an extra appoggiatura to that, indeed the example in C, that the appoggiatura from below, once another appoggiatura has been added, it ceases to, you know, repeat the previous note. So in that way, you could establish, yes, maybe Bach is right. If that other statement is correct, well then it would make this one correct too, when you connect those two pieces of information. Yeah, and so, like I said, I play it without an extra appoggiatura. Then I'll play the appoggiatura short, and I played one as long, but the C appoggiatura written in as a small note, I'll play short. I won't play long at all, because we as well know from what Bach says that when the appoggiatura forms an octave with the bass, then that's played short, because otherwise it would be too empty. So the appoggiatura from below, playing that extra appoggiatura long, wouldn't really make any sense. And here's D. So Bach says an extra appoggiatura certainly works after the appoggiatura from below. And you can see in that D that here is that 18th century lick. What Bach said about when a tone rises a second and falls again, the middle note can easily have a short appoggiatura. So here is a bit two more pieces of information to connect to each other. So part of this 18th century lick can be the appoggiatura from below. Über alle bisher angeführte Fälle, welche keine Vorschläge vertragen, wollen wir noch einige oft vorkommende Fehler betrachten, welche bei Gelegenheit der Vorschläge begangen werden. Der erste ist dieser. Wenn man bei dem Schlusse nach einem scharfen Triller, in welchen man ohne Vorschlag hineingegangen ist, einen Vorschlag von oben macht. Tab 3, Figur 4, G. Kommt ein Triller nach einem Vorschlag vor, so kann vor der folgende herunter, Figur 19a, oder hinaufgehende Note B, ein neuer stehen. Der zweite Fehler ist, wenn man den Vorschlag von seiner folgenden Note abreißt, indem man ihn entweder nicht genugsam aushält oder wohl gar in der Einteilung der vorhergehenden Note mit anhängt. Figur 20a. So here's tab 3, figure 4, G. And this is the example of the first mistake. And what we had in the last paragraph was Bach describing the world of music. And this is the world that Beethoven explored in this book. And what we have in this paragraph is Bach describing the world of Lilliput. And it's interesting because it reveals how what Lilliput understood or what they knew or what they heard, what they recognized. And so the first mistake is adding an appoggiatura to the final note after a trill where there was no appoggiatura before that trill, where in the piece the player just went straight into the trill, trilled away its length, and then performs an appoggiatura from above before that closing note. And so it reveals what Lilliput knew, what they recognized. And like I said, with Slash or something, that or a guitarist, a rock guitarist, they'll be at their coolest when they're performing an appoggiatura. And the Lilliput back then, I mean, they're just as wrong as Lilliput now, but they heard giants play. I mean, this Lilliput that Bach is talking about, they'll have heard Bach play. They'll have heard Mozart play. They will hear Beethoven play. Whereas Lilliput nowadays, there are no giants for them to hear. They only have Lilliput, so they've no conception of the appoggiatura or how cool it can be. So nobody is actually, I can picture this the same way as, guitar shops when I was a teenager. And you go to the guitar shop and the highlight of, you'd go into town and the highlight of the trip would be asking to try a guitar in the guitar shop. And then what you hear then is a whole bunch of kids emulating their guitar heroes, and they're doing all those things themselves that they found to be so cool in their guitar heroes. But they're not necessarily doing it right. They're doing what they think they've heard. And this is what Bach would have encountered in Lilliput when he was around. People hearing the appoggiatura and thinking it's so cool. And then doing what they thought they heard. But very often when you hear something that's cool, what you don't know is what's been done to prepare that cool moment. That you won't hear because you don't even know it's going to be cool. So you miss the preparation. And so all you hear is the cool moment, and that's all you have in your mind. And so when you go and try and recreate it, you're only doing that, but you fail. You're completely oblivious to what preparation you might need. And so these Lilliput will have heard Bach play, and they'll have heard him add an appoggiatura from above before the closing note, and they thought, yeah, that sounded really cool. I'd love to. I'm going to do it like that too. It's great. And this is annoying Bach. He's hearing it all the time, and it annoys him. And so he's saying, look, if you want to add the appoggiatura from above to the final note, you have to have an appoggiatura before the trill. Do that and then add the appoggiatura. Don't be adding the appoggiatura afterwards. And it's like, I sort of see him there the same as I see the guitar assistant, or, has to listen to it all the time. These kids, like there's the joke in Wayne's World, no stairway to heaven, because they all they're sick of hearing Stairway to Heaven. So it's a bit like that. Bach is helping Lilliput, telling them, look, if you want to do it, this is the way to do it. Stop doing it that other way. So what I can see from that is Lilliput understood the Appoggiatura. They still got it wrong, but they at least were aware of what it is, or of what it can be. Whereas nowadays Lilliput gets it wrong, but they get it wrong in a different way. They don't get this wrong because they don't add Appoggiaturas anywhere, because they don't know that can be done. So they don't get it wrong that way, but they do get it wrong in the terms of they don't have an understanding of how it's meant to sound. So you can listen. I'll play the figure tab 3, figure 4G. I'll play the trill, and I'll play what's wrong, and you can hear that and you can wonder, why might that be a mistake? Yeah, so that's how that sounds. And here's how it sounds. I'll add an Appoggiatura before the trill. So the same example, G figure 4, and I'll just add an Appoggiatura and E before the D with the trill. And then you can see, do you notice a difference in the result? This piece of information can be added then to what? First of all, another thing is Bach says in that paragraph, he says, so on top of the cases, the instances that don't suffer Appoggiaturas, we'll look at these ones, mistakes that happen often. So you could ask yourself, where were those places that don't suffer Appoggiaturas? So that would be a reason to look back over the paragraphs with that objective to locate and hear again those instances that don't suffer Appoggiaturas. In that way you can start connecting the information. But you can connect what Bach's already said about that figure 4G at the time and add it to this information, so you're getting more of a picture, more of Bach's picture, more of Bach's understanding of how it all ties together. And if you don't think of these information as kind of flat lying on the floor, but as a kind of a network or a structure, and it's around you rather than just in a pile on the floor. And what he said in connection to that, he presented the example E, and he said that after a trill an Appoggiatura from below works better than one from above. So that's what else he had said in connection to that example. And if you look at E, you can see that the trill before the Appoggiatura from below has an Appoggiatura before it. And so Bach says the Appoggiatura from below works better after a trill than an Appoggiatura from above. And here's that example E, how it sounds. So if you think of what Bach says, that if the trill comes after Appoggiatura, well then a new one can stand before the following note. Does that go then as well for the Appoggiatura from below following the trill? And so you could listen and wonder, does that apply there too? Because in the first time he mentioned the example figure 4G, he didn't say anything about that. So those are the two pieces of information you can connect to each other and wonder. So in here's figure 19A, the plus sign above the C, and there was a plus sign in the last talking video that I uploaded and I forgot to mention it, but this plus sign represents a trill. And I think there in what he says, if a trill comes after an Appoggiatura, so this he specifically says that C in that example figure 19A, that C has a trill. So you can be fairly 100% certain that that plus sign represents a trill. So A was the note after the trill got an Appoggiatura from above, and here's B, and you can see the note, the trill has an Appoggiatura before it, and the following note gets a new Appoggiatura from below before it. And these two examples, A and B, figure 19, A and B, one way you could use them would be again in determining, trying to figure out in a piece, is this Appoggiatura meant to be long or short? And if you see a note with a trill and the following note has an Appoggiatura, and that note with the trill has an Appoggiatura before it, well then you can think, okay, the note after the trill has an Appoggiatura, so therefore the note before it must be long. So that can be one of the, when you're making a decision, should this Appoggiatura be long or short? Ideally you're going to have as many pros and cons to it being short and long as possible in order to safely, like with confidence, be able to decide, yes, this is the right answer. And so one of the pros in the argument for it being long is the fact that after the trill there was an Appoggiatura, that there was an Appoggiatura before the note following the trill, which means the note beforehand, or the Appoggiatura before the trill, is long. Because if you think it's short, if that Appoggiatura was short, well then a short Appoggiatura is the same as no Appoggiatura when in terms of a trill, because the short Appoggiatura just adds to the trill. So what you have is you're going straight into the trill without an Appoggiatura, which leads to that failure, that mistake that Lilliput makes, that Bach wants Lilliput to correct. Bach wants Lilliput to improve. And as well, if you have a composer who does damage to good taste, who's not a master like Mozart, or like the composer who composed K330, no, wait, he wasn't the master. Mozart was the master, and K30, the K330 composer did a lot of damage to good taste. And you can encounter composers who as well are in the cage, who don't move in the world of music, and they'll do damage to good taste, which means it's like they're shooting themselves in their foot. They're making their own compositions sound worse than they need to sound. So if you want to present their composition in the best possible light, you'll correct the damage to good taste that they do. So if you see of a composer, they have a trill, and then the following note has an appoggiatura before it. If you agree with what Bach says, if you agree with the mistake about not having an appoggiatura in front after a note, after a trill that hasn't had an appoggiatura before it, well then potentially you could add an appoggiatura before the note with the trill, and you know, and not do the damage to good taste that the composer has instigated. And what you will be doing is you'll be helping the composer too, because you'll be presenting his piece in a better light. So that can be a help into how you can better perform pieces by composers who, you know, who themselves are in the cage, who themselves do damage to good taste. And the same can be said for figure 18b. If you're playing a piece where there's a written out appoggiatura before the final note, and the composer has added another appoggiatura before that, well, you can do the composer a favour, you can do yourself a favour, and you can leave that out and avoid doing that damage to good taste. So in that way, they can be used too. And here's figure 20A. And so what you see is how it's written out in the first bar, and in the next bar is how Lilliput plays it. And so here as well you can get a sense of Lilliput. Back then, and Lilliput then they were just as wrong as Lilliput now, but they were wrong in a different way. Again, like I said, they were around in the time of Mozart and Beethoven. They'll have heard their use of the appoggiatura. So you can see Lilliput nowadays, the roll of honour, they would play that B and A as two quavers or two eighth notes. Whereas Lilliput of Mozart's time and Bach's time, they will have known. You can see there from what Bach wrote it out the way Lilliput would have played it. Lilliput knows it's a short appoggiatura. As you can see, it's filling out the leap of a third, and they're short according to Bach. And Lilliput knows they're short, whereas Lilliput nowadays doesn't know they're short. So in one way they're closer to the truth. They're wrong in different ways. So they knew it was a short appoggiatura, except what they do is they play it too soon. And I'll play it how, you know, I'll play the first bar, and then I'll play how Lilliput will have played it. And I'll play as well how Lilliput, the roll of honour, would play it nowadays. And I could imagine that Lilliput, and I'll try and play that too, I can imagine that when Lilliput plays that version that Bach wrote, that the C and the B might not necessarily be played evenly, and that there'll be a sort of an uneven quality between the C and the B, because they are, after all, they are playing what they think is a short appoggiatura. And here's the next example of figure 20A. And there you can see the appoggiaturas are again filling out the leap of a third. And what does Lilliput do? They hang it in the division of the preceding note, just like the other example. They divide up the preceding note, they hang it into that division, dividing up. Instead of having it in the dividing up of the following note, they have it in the dividing up of the preceding note. So they'll play it like as you see there in the example. And so I'll play that and how Lilliput plays it. And the Lilliput back then is no different to the Lilliput now. And I was listening to, the K.8, the rondo and polonaise, the second movement of that sonata. And normally I don't want to listen to Lilliput because, it's no use. They're just wrong. But in bar 20 of that sonata, I heard, I wanted to listen to how Lilliput plays the bit before that. But then I heard that bit, and it was by somebody who'd deserve a place on the Roll of Honour, successful, will have had many. I think they're not living anymore. They belong to an earlier generation of pianists, not too early, judging from the quality of the recording. It could be that they're still alive, I don't know. But in bar 20, Mozart, just like in the third movement, what you have is notes, leaps of a third, and Mozart adds the short, unchanging appoggiatura to those notes. But what he writes them equal to the other notes and divides them up in the bar. And it could be that he did that to take an extra precaution, to guard it from Lilliput of his day, because you can see in that figure 20A, the second one, how Lilliput will have performed it. And so Mozart took an extra precaution. He wrote it out in the bar so that the Lilliput can see exactly how it's meant to be played, exactly that the appoggiatura belongs to the following note and shouldn't be divided up with the preceding note. And what did this person on the Roll of Honour do, despite the extra precaution that Mozart took to ensure that this mistake here in the figure that Bach wrote out, that Lilliput doesn't commit that mistake? What did that person in the Roll of Honour, how did they play it? They played it exactly the way Bach showed how Lilliput plays it. This is a pianist people say is great, belongs to, if you think of the Roll of Honour as an actual Roll of Honour and not my Roll of Honour, not the extra implication that my Roll of Honour has, but the great. This is one who'll be considered one of the greatest Mozart interpreters in all of Lilliput. They play it exactly the same. Exactly the same. Despite the Lilliput here has an excuse. I mean, it's not spelled out for them. They could say, oh, well, I got a bit confused with the appoggiatura, and then you say, well, okay, but Mozart took the extra precaution and still the Roll of Honour got it wrong. And I would say as well, just quickly before I end this, that what Bach says about not holding the Appoggiatura long enough and you know, ripping it from the following note, that when the roll of honor play all those Appoggiaturas as normal semiquavers in the first movements of the sonatas, that they are committing that mistake that Lilliput makes. The second mistake that Bach points out, the common mistake, what they are not doing, because they're playing them each as separate individual semiquavers, they are not connecting the Appoggiatura to the following note, so they're cutting it too short. They're not connecting it. And so every single time you hear in a piece like Rondo alla Turca, every time you hear the roll of honor play that semiquaver as a normal, those Appoggiaturas as a normal semiquaver, they are committing that mistake here that Bach says one shouldn't commit. They are not connecting the Appoggiatura to the following note. They're ripping it from it. And so instead of having an Appoggiatura and an Abzug, you have two separate notes. So there you have, in paragraph 23, Bach describes the world of music. And in paragraph 24, he describes the world of Lilliput. And he tries to help Lilliput. So, but if you think about it, it creates a picture. You can understand how the people heard giants like Bach or Mozart, and as well how they misunderstood them. They misunderstood what they were hearing, or they didn't notice. They only noticed a fraction of what was there to be noticed. Just like the Lilliput nowadays, you know, so many things go over their heads, past them. I mean, you know, that mistake in the Rondo Polonaise thing, that was an obvious one, but it's not one that Lilliputs will spot. But this here, Beethoven was here. We're on his path. You're on his path. And I'm the tour guide. Okay, well, I'll leave it at that. And the next chapter will end, or the next video will end this chapter on Appoggiaturas. And Bach is going to take a further look at the mistakes. We'll be talking a bit more about Lilliput. And he seems to do that, doesn't he? I mean, at the end of the chapters, he seems to finish the chapters talking about Lilliput. So it's not entirely my fault that I spend so much time talking about Lilliput. But the damage they do is just, you can't go. There's no areas you can venture into that Lilliput, that mediocrity hasn't vandalized. You know, so they'll always be an issue. It'll always be an issue. Okay, well, thanks. Bye.